My name is Jack Daniels, and at 58, I've worked hard all my life, doing what I could to provide for my family. There's something deeply satisfying about earning your way, even if it means long hours and sacrifice. I'm no rich man. I don't live in a big house, drive a fancy car, or wear designer clothes. I've always believed that if you're going to do something, you do it right, whether it's fixing a car in the shop or taking care of your responsibilities as a father. And for years, I thought that's what mattered most. The world around me, though, seemed to have a different opinion. Take my daughter, Emily, for example. From the day she was born, I've given her everything I could. Late nights spent in the shop, double shifts on weekends, putting every penny I could into her education. I wanted to give her a future that was better than mine, a life free from the struggles I'd known. But the more I worked, the more I realized something was changing between us. It wasn't always obvious, but as she grew older, I started noticing how different she was. Where I found value in hard work and modest living, Emily seemed to have a much more materialistic outlook on life. She's in her late 20s now, and her view of the world couldn't be further from mine. She's with Peter, her boyfriend, and together they have this life that revolves around appearances, things like new gadgets, the expensive vacations, and fancy dinners. I've always found it hard to relate to that. To me, a day spent working on a car with my hands or sharing a simple meal with family was more fulfilling than any luxury item could ever be. But Emily doesn't see it that way. She's always been a little entitled, expecting the world to give her what she wants, without the sweat and sacrifice that comes with it. Maybe I was too blind to see it at first, but now it's hard to ignore. Father's Day was supposed to be a nice, simple occasion. The kind of day where I could relax for a change, enjoy a meal, and maybe get a few small tokens of appreciation from my family. But as always, Emily had something else in mind. I'll never forget the look on her face when she handed me the gift that afternoon. It was wrapped in a cheap envelope, all crumpled like it had been tossed around. When I opened it, there was a $5 lottery ticket inside. "Here you go, Dad," she said, her voice a little too cheerful. "Happy Father's Day." She leaned in, eyes sparkling with mischief. "If you win, half of it is mine, right? That's the deal." I looked at the ticket in my hand and tried to smile. "Thanks, Emily," I said, but it didn't feel like a gift. Not really. It felt like an afterthought, like she couldn't be bothered to put any real effort into something that might show me she cared. The ticket wasn't worth the paper it was printed on, and yet she handed it to me as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. It stung more than I cared to admit. Still, I did my best to keep my composure. "Very thoughtful, sweetheart," I said, forcing the words out. But I couldn't shake the bitter feeling that was creeping up inside me. This wasn't what I had expected. Not from her. The whole thing felt wrong. I didn't need a lottery ticket. I didn't need a big, expensive gesture. All I wanted was something that showed she understood how hard I'd worked for everything we had. But maybe that wasn't something she could understand anymore. As if to rub salt in the wound, Emily wasn't done with her generosity. She reached under the table and pulled out a sleek, glossy red box, the kind of box that screamed expensive. Peter, her boyfriend, sat there with a smug smile on his face, as if he knew exactly what was coming. "This is for you, Peter," Emily said, her voice full of excitement as she handed him the box. Inside was a brand-new gaming laptop. The price tag on something like that had to be at least $2,000, more than I spent on groceries for the entire month. Peter grinned, clearly impressed. "You didn't have to," he said, though his eyes told a different story. The look he gave the laptop was one of someone who expected nothing less. As I watched them, I felt like I was sinking deeper into my chair, my chest tightening. It was like they were speaking in a language I couldn't understand, a language of wealth and entitlement that I had no part in. Emily beamed at him, the kind of smile that always seemed to tell him exactly what he wanted to hear. "You've always been there for me, Peter. You deserve the best," she said, completely unaware of how those words were slowly suffocating me. She was so quick to give him something expensive, something that would show him she cared, while I got a $5 ticket, a joke of a gift, and a reminder of everything I couldn't provide. It was all too much. My hands gripped the lottery ticket in my lap, my fingers trembling slightly. I couldn't shake the unfairness of it. Here I was, a man who had worked for decades, who had sacrificed my time and energy for my family, and this was the appreciation I got. A $5 ticket, a laugh, and a demonstration of how little I meant compared to Peter and his shiny new laptop. "That's really generous of you, Emily," I said, trying to force the words out, but they tasted bitter. I looked down at the ticket in my hand, my fingers still clutching it tightly. It felt small, insignificant, like everything I had worked for was being dismissed by the very people I had sacrificed so much for. Peter, of course, didn't miss the opportunity to make his feelings known. "This is a proper gift," he said, holding up the laptop with pride. "Not like some paper with numbers on it." His words stung more than I wanted to admit. The way he looked at me with that cold, almost judgmental gaze, it was like I wasn't even part of the same world they lived in. Emily laughed, flipping her hair with that air of confidence she always had. "Well, it's the thought that counts, right?" she said before adding with a smirk, "But seriously, if you win, I expect my cut. I'm the one who gave it to you." That was it. It hit me harder than I expected. Half? She was serious? It took everything in me not to explode right there. But instead, I just nodded, stuffed the ticket into my pocket and muttered, "Thanks, Emily." The dinner continued, but it was all a blur. Laughter and chatter filled the air, but I couldn't escape the weight of what had just happened. I sat at the table, surrounded by the noise, yet I felt like I was in a room all by myself. My mind kept replaying the scene over and over. Emily's $5 lottery ticket, Peter's expensive laptop, her dismissive laugh, and the words that still echoed in my head. "If you win, half of it is mine." It wasn't the money. It wasn't the ticket. It was everything that came with it. All the years I'd spent working my ass off, the double shifts in the shop, the nights I came home so exhausted I couldn't even eat dinner without falling asleep at the table, and this was how I was treated. My hands were shaking slightly as I picked at my food, pushing it around on the plate without really tasting it. I had always thought Emily and I shared something real. I thought she understood. I thought she knew the sacrifices I made for her, for our family. But now it felt like all of that had been erased in one swift gesture. The lottery ticket, that pathetic $5 gift, was a reflection of how little she seemed to care about the years of hard work I'd put in. It hurt more than I ever imagined something like that could. I tried to focus on the conversation around me, to at least pretend I was part of the moment. But everything felt distant. Emily and Peter kept exchanging looks across the table, their smiles wide and carefree. I couldn't help but notice how easy it seemed for them, how effortlessly they lived in a world where money solved everything. That was their reality, a world of convenience and luxury. They didn't know what it was like to worry about making ends meet, to stretch every dollar until it screamed. That was my world. That's what I had built for them. When the meal ended, Emily and Peter quickly excused themselves, leaving in a hurry as if they had somewhere more important to be. I could hear their car starting outside, the engine roaring to life, and then the sound of their voices fading into the distance. The house fell quiet, and it felt like a weight had been lifted, though the emotional burden still pressed down on me. I stayed seated at the table, my eyes locked on that damn lottery ticket in my pocket, the same ticket that had been handed to me like a joke. I couldn't get it out of my head. Part of me wanted to just throw it away, to burn it and forget about it. But another part of me, the part that had always believed in fairness, in doing things the right way, couldn't let go of the fact that Emily had made a mockery of everything I stood for. The silence in the house felt oppressive, like it was closing in on me. I walked over to the kitchen counter and started cleaning up, the familiar routine grounding me, but it did little to ease the pain that lingered. The dirty dishes piled up in the sink, but my mind kept drifting back to that moment. The way Emily had handed me the ticket with a smile that didn't feel like love. The way Peter had looked at me with that smug, entitled expression. And the way Emily had casually mentioned that I owed her half of whatever I won. I knew I had to talk to her. I had to tell her how much it hurt. I had to make her understand that this wasn't about money. This wasn't about some ticket I didn't care about. It was about respect. It was about recognition. I had spent my whole life working to give her everything, to give her the world she wanted, and all I got in return was a $5 lottery ticket and a joke at my expense. I needed to make her see that. But when I picked up my phone to call her, my fingers hesitated. What could I say? How could I make her understand when she'd already made up her mind about everything? How could I make her see how much I had given up for her, for our family, when all she saw was the money? I sighed and put the phone back down on the table, the weight of indecision heavy in my chest. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I went through my usual morning routine, coffee, newspaper, checking my bank statement, the usual. But something felt off, like I was just going through the motions of a life that wasn't mine anymore. The bills, the small expenses, the money that seemed to disappear so quickly, it all felt different now. I glanced at the total on my bank statement and felt the sharp sting of realization. I hadn't been paying attention, but there it was, $2,500 spent at Luxury Travel Co. on the same day as Father's Day. My heart skipped a beat. That was the exact amount for Peter's laptop. The realization hit me like a punch in the gut. Emily had used my money to buy him that gift without asking. She had taken it just like that. Family money, she called it. But it wasn't hers. It wasn't even close. I picked up the phone again, my fingers now steady as I dialed her number. It rang twice before she picked up, her voice groggy like I had woken her from a nap. "Hi, Dad," she said, almost annoyed. "What's up?" "Emily, there's a charge on my account for $2,500, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, but the anger was starting to seep through. "What is this?" "Oh, that," she replied, so casually, like it was no big deal. "I used your account to buy Peter a little something special. He deserves it, you know. He's been really supportive of me." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Without asking?" My voice cracked, but I couldn't help it. "That's stealing, Emily." She laughed, a cold, dismissive laugh. "It's not stealing, Dad. It's just family money. You wouldn't have spent it on anything important anyway." My fists clenched at my sides. "That money was for our savings, Emily. For us. Not for Peter's laptop." Her tone shifted, sharp and defensive. "It's no big deal, Dad. Peter's been there for me. Maybe you could learn to treat people like he does, huh?" I hung up before I could say anything else. The shaking in my hands wouldn't stop. I'd never felt so small, so insignificant in my own daughter's eyes. She had crossed a line I didn't know could be crossed, and now I wasn't sure there was any coming back from it. The following days dragged on, each one feeling heavier than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, the gnawing sensation that something inside me had snapped. Emily's words, her actions echoed in my mind like a constant reminder of everything I had worked for and everything she had taken for granted. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. But there was also a deep sadness in me, a grief that was hard to articulate. I had spent so many years thinking I was doing the right thing, sacrificing everything for my family, and this was the thanks I got. I tried to keep myself busy. Work was a welcome distraction. There was always something that needed fixing at the shop, an engine that needed rebuilding, a transmission that needed attention. It was a good, honest way to spend the day, but it didn't help the hurt. Every time I turned a wrench or wiped my brow, I found my thoughts drifting back to that $5 lottery ticket. Not the ticket itself, but the meaning behind it. The lack of appreciation, the disrespect, and the fact that Emily had taken something that wasn't hers without a second thought and used it for someone else, someone who, in her eyes, had more value than me. The morning after I had hung up on Emily, I went through my usual routine, though it felt hollow. I made my coffee, checked the mailbox, flipped through the newspaper, and sat down to review my bank statement. It was a habit I had gotten into over the years, making sure everything added up, even though the numbers rarely changed. But that day, when I looked at the statement, something caught my eye. There was another charge, this time for a $500 payment to Premium Sports. I froze. I hadn't made that payment. I had no idea what it was for. My heart raced as I scanned the date. It was from the previous day, just after I had spoken to Emily. I didn't even need to ask her about it. I knew what had happened. She had taken more money from me. My hands shook as I dialed her number again. This time, when she answered, I was already on the edge. "Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady but failing. There's another charge on my account, $500 to Premium Sports. What is that? She hesitated on the other end of the line. I could hear the soft rustle of her clothes, the sound of something moving in the background. Oh, that? I used it to buy Peter a new golf membership. He's been talking about getting one for months, and he deserves it. She said it like it was the most natural thing in the world, like taking my money without asking was just a regular part of life. Without asking? I repeated, feeling my chest tighten. You took more money from my account, Emily. I can't believe this. She sighed, a sound that made my blood boil. Dad, it's not that big of a deal. Peter's been there for me. He's helped me with everything, and now I'm helping him. You don't understand what it's like, always trying to keep up, and you wouldn't have spent that money anyway. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the rising anger. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect, about boundaries that had been crossed, about a daughter who thought she could take whatever she wanted without any consideration for what it did to her father. I've always provided for you, Emily, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I've worked myself to the bone for you, and now you're taking my money without asking, using it for someone else? After everything I've done for you? There was a pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, slow and deliberate, like she was trying to think of what to say. When she finally spoke, it was in a tone I didn't recognize. Dad, stop acting like I'm stealing from you. It's not like that. I'm just trying to make things better for all of us. Her voice was colder now, defensive. You always say I should do better, but then you criticize me when I try. What do you expect me to do? Sit around in this old house while Peter struggles? That hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't just blaming me for what had happened. She was twisting it, making me the villain. She was accusing me of holding her back, of not supporting her, of not understanding the sacrifices she had to make. And the worst part was, she was using Peter as an excuse, as if her actions were somehow justified because of him. I didn't know what to say. The anger I'd been holding on to for days was boiling over, but I couldn't find the words to express it. So instead, I said the only thing that made sense at that moment. I can't do this anymore, Emily. I can't keep pretending that this is okay. You've crossed a line, and I'm done. There was a long silence. I could feel her on the other end, probably staring at the phone in disbelief, not understanding why I was reacting this way. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice quiet and sharp. Fine. If that's how you feel, then maybe we don't need to talk anymore. The words stung, but they also gave me a strange sense of relief. I'd been waiting for that moment, the moment when I could finally say enough was enough. I hung up the phone and sat there staring at the empty space in front of me. The house felt even smaller now, more suffocating. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or just tired, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done. I had given everything for her and it still wasn't enough. And at that moment I realized I couldn't keep giving anymore. Not when it was clear that she didn't value what I had done for her. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life again. I didn't need her approval, her acknowledgement, or her money. I had my own sense of self-worth, and it was time to stop letting her take that away from me. The next few days passed in a haze. I went through the motions, waking up, working on cars at the shop, eating dinner by myself, but none of it felt the same. My home, which once felt like a place of refuge, now felt like a prison. Every corner of it reminded me of what I had lost, not just in terms of money, but of a relationship that had been severed. Emily, my daughter, the person I had spent my life building a future for, had become someone I barely recognized. And no matter how many times I ran the conversations through my head, no matter how many times I tried to convince myself that I had done the right thing, the hurt wouldn't fade. It wasn't just about the money, and I knew that. It was about the fact that all those years of sacrifice had meant so little to her. She had taken and taken without giving anything back, and in that moment she had crossed a line that I couldn't ignore. I had always told myself that a parent's job was to give everything for their children, to make sure they had everything they needed to succeed. But somewhere along the way, I lost track of myself in that process. I had given so much, And yet it was clear that Emily no longer saw me as someone worthy of respect. She didn't even see the value of the sacrifices I had made for her. I couldn't stop thinking about her words, about how she blamed me for her choices, how she twisted everything I had done to provide for her into something negative. "You wouldn't have spent it anyway," she had said. I kept replaying that line in my mind, each time it cutting a little deeper. My whole life I had worked with my hands, never asking for anything in return. And yet, when I asked for something as simple as respect, it was too much. It was Friday when I finally decided to take action. I had been avoiding checking my bank account for a few days, but I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I needed to know if there was anything else missing, anything else that had slipped through the cracks. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and logged into my account. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled up the statement. I scanned the transactions quickly, my eyes skipping from one line to the next until something caught my attention. There it was, another charge. This one was even bigger than the last. It was for $3,000, labeled Premium Travel Co., and dated just 2 days ago. My stomach turned. I knew immediately what it was. Emily had used my account again. She had booked another expensive gift for Peter, a vacation this time. I could feel my blood pressure rising as I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. What kind of person does this? What kind of daughter steals from her father and then spends the money on someone else? I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, but in reality it was only a few minutes. I was beyond angry. I was disgusted. I had never been a confrontational, but this time I couldn't just sit back and take it. This time, something inside me broke, and I knew I had to take control of this situation once and for all. I picked up my phone and dialed Emily's number. It rang 3 times before she picked up, her voice sounding casual, almost bored. "Hey, Dad," she said. "What's up?" "Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the anger bubbling inside. "I need to know why there's a $3,000 charge on my account for Premium Travel Co. What is that?" There was a pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, slow and calculated, as if she was trying to come up with an excuse. "Oh, that," she said. "Finally. I booked Peter and me a trip. He's been working so hard lately, and I thought it would be nice to take a little vacation." I could feel my chest tighten as the words left her mouth. A vacation? I worked 60-hour weeks to keep the lights on, and she was spending my money like it was hers to begin with. "And you didn't think to ask me first?" I asked, my voice rising. "You didn't think I might want to know when you're taking money from my account?" She sighed, clearly annoyed. "Dad, it's just a vacation. You don't need it. You don't even use the money for anything anyway. You don't spend it on anything fun. Peter deserves this, and I thought I was doing something nice for us." "You're taking my money without asking," I shouted, unable to hold it in anymore. "That's not your money, Emily. That's mine. You don't get to just decide what's nice for you. You've been taking from me, using me for your own selfish needs, and I've had enough." There was silence on the other end of the phone. For a moment I thought she had hung up. But then she spoke, her voice colder than before. "Fine, Dad. If you're so upset, I guess we're done. I'll just pay you back when I can. But don't expect me to keep trying to make things right when all you do is criticize me." I was stunned. It was like she had no understanding of what she had done, no remorse for what she had taken. "Don't bother paying me back, Emily," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I don't need your money. I need respect. I need to know that after everything I've done for you, you at least care about what I've given up." But I knew right then that I would never get that from her. The daughter I had spent my life providing for, the one I had tried to protect and love, was gone. In her place was someone who saw me as nothing more than a source of money, someone who could be manipulated and used without a second thought. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my throat tightening as I finally spoke the words I had been avoiding. "I'm done. I'm done being your ATM, done being the person you can take advantage of. I'm done." I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the decision settle on my shoulders. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the right thing. I had spent too long ignoring the signs, too long giving and giving without ever getting anything in return. But now I was finally standing up for myself, And as I looked around at my house, my life, I realized that I was no longer the man I had been. I had changed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of freedom. The days that followed were oddly quiet. It was like the world had decided to pause for a moment, and I was left alone with my thoughts. Emily's absence from my life felt palpable, like a gaping hole where something important used to be. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to feel relieved or sad, but what I did know was that my decision to cut ties with her had opened up a space in my life that I hadn't realized I needed. It wasn't that I wanted to sever our relationship. It wasn't that I wanted her out of my life entirely. But I'd come to realize that no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough for her. She would always take, and I would always give, and the cycle would never end unless I chose to step away. The shop became my sanctuary. It always had been, but now it felt different. There was something therapeutic about working with my hands, about getting lost in the mechanics of a car, in the quiet hum of the tools. Each repair, each job completed felt like a small victory. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of control over something in my life. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I wasn't relying on anyone else to validate my worth or to tell me what I should be doing. I was just doing it, doing what I knew how to do best. I had always prided myself on being a provider, on being there for my family when they needed me. But now I was starting to realize that being a provider didn't mean sacrificing your own sense of self in the process. And that's what I had done for years. I had been so focused on making sure Emily had everything she wanted, on being the father she could depend on, that I lost sight of who I was in the process. I had become someone I didn't recognize, someone who allowed himself to be taken advantage of. A week went by, and still, no word from Emily. At first, I kept expecting her to call, to text, to apologize, to try to make things right. But as the days passed, I started to realize that maybe this was the way it was meant to be. Maybe this was the closure I had been waiting for. I wasn't going to chase after her anymore. I wasn't going to beg her to see things my way. If she didn't care enough to recognize what she had done, then that was on her. But then, just as I was starting to adjust to the silence, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, and for a moment I debated whether or not to answer. I had become accustomed to the idea of not answering calls from people who didn't matter. But something made me pick it up. "Hello?" I said, my voice cautious. "Dad, it's Emily," she said, her voice sounding strained, like she had been crying. I froze. The weight of hearing her voice again hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so much time trying to convince myself that I was done with her, that I was better off without the constant disappointment. But now, hearing her call me Dad again, it felt like everything I had worked for was about to crumble. "What do you want, Emily?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral, though I could feel the walls I had built around myself starting to crack. "I know I've been horrible," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I was just lost. I didn't know what I was doing. Peter, he's been pressuring me, and I let him get inside my head. I didn't mean to take that money. I didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't matter. You're my dad, and I've always loved you." Her words were almost too much to bear. For a moment I stood there, just listening, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Was this real? Was she really apologizing? Or was this just another attempt to manipulate me into giving her what she wanted? "I don't know if I can believe you, Emily," I said, my voice cracking despite myself. "You've lied to me. You've taken from me without asking. You've shown me that you don't respect me, and that's something I can't just forget. You've crossed a line." "I know, Dad. I know I did. And I don't expect you to just forgive me right away. I don't deserve that. But I want to try. I want to make it right. I don't want to lose you." Her voice broke, and I could hear the sincerity in it, even through my anger. I stood there for a long moment, letting her words wash over me, trying to figure out what to do with them. Was this the turning point I'd been waiting for? Was this the moment when she finally understood the consequences of her actions? Or was this just another empty apology, a way to manipulate me into letting her back in? "I don't know if we can go back to the way things were, Emily," I said finally, my voice low. "I don't know if I can just forget everything that's happened, but I'm not going to shut you out. I need time. I need space to figure out what this all means." "I understand," she said quietly. "I just want to try. I don't want to lose you. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." I didn't know what to say after that. I didn't know if I could believe her, or if I even wanted to. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was hope. Maybe this wasn't the end of our relationship. Maybe it was just the beginning of something different, something that could heal the wounds that had been festering for so long. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice steady now. "But don't expect everything to be fixed overnight. This is going to take time." "I understand," she said softly, and then the line went quiet. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control. I wasn't going to let Emily manipulate me anymore, but I wasn't going to close the door on her either. I needed to find a way to heal, to rebuild what had been broken. And maybe, just maybe, this was the first step. The following weeks were a strange mix of uncertainty and quiet reflection. Emily's apology had left me conflicted, torn between my anger at what she had done and the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth saving in our relationship. I tried to put her out of my mind as much as I could. I kept myself busy, throwing myself into work at the shop, focusing on the cars that needed repairs and the customers who came in looking for help. The steady rhythm of the shop was comforting, a distraction from the emotional turmoil I was still processing. But at night, when everything was quiet, my thoughts inevitably drifted back to her. There were moments when I thought about the man I used to be. I used to believe that family came first, that love was about sacrifice, about doing everything for the ones you cared about, no matter the cost. But what had that gotten me? A daughter who took from me without a second thought, who used my sacrifices as a stepping stone for her own comfort, all the while taking my love and hard work for granted. I had spent my life building a foundation for her, only to watch her trample it in favor of materialism and selfishness. I could feel the weight of those years pressing down on me every time I thought about her, the way she had laughed when she threw that lottery ticket at me, the casual dismissal in her voice when she said, "Half of it's mine." I had tried to brush it off, but it had eaten at me, bit by bit. I knew, deep down, that things would never be the same. I could forgive her, but I didn't know if I could ever forget what she had done. The trust that had once been the cornerstone of our relationship had been shattered, and rebuilding it would take more than just words or promises. Emily didn't call for a few days after our conversation. At first, I thought it was a good thing, space for both of us to think. But as the days turned into a week, I started to wonder if she had just moved on. Maybe she didn't care as much as she claimed. Maybe this was just her idea of making things right, and when it didn't go the way she wanted, she decided to pull back. The thought stung, but I kept my distance. I wasn't going to be the one to reach out again. Not yet. I had given her all the chances I could. Now it was up to her to show me that she understood. I was in the shop one Saturday afternoon when my phone rang. It was Emily's number, and for a moment I just stared at the screen. I wasn't sure what I expected, an apology, an explanation, or maybe just an update on her life. But when I finally answered, there was something in her voice that made my stomach tighten. "Dad, it's me," she said, her voice trembling slightly, like she was unsure of how I would respond. "I know you said you needed time, and I've been giving you space, but I need to talk to you. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I know I've screwed up. I was wrong, and I want to make it right." I closed my eyes for a moment, my heart skipping a beat. There it was again, her voice, soft and vulnerable, the same voice I had heard when she was a little girl, asking for my help. But this time, it was different. This wasn't the Emily I had known for years. This was someone who was finally owning up to her mistakes. "I've been selfish, Dad, and I don't know why I did what I did. I thought I was doing the right thing, I guess. I thought if I took care of Peter, everything would be okay, and I could finally feel like I was in control of my life. But I was wrong. I know I hurt you, and I can't take back what I did, but I want to try. I want to show you that I can be the daughter you deserve. I don't want to lose you." Her words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. I could feel the sincerity in her voice, but there was still a part of me that wasn't ready to let go of my anger, that wasn't sure if I could believe her this time. How many times had I let her off the hook? How many times had I believed her apologies only to be disappointed again? But something in the way she spoke, in the raw honesty of her confession, made me pause. I couldn't deny the hurt, but I also couldn't ignore the fact that she was trying. She was taking responsibility for her actions, and that was more than I had ever gotten from her before. "Emily," I said, my voice low, "I don't know if I can trust you again. What you did, it's not something I can just forget. It's not about the money. It's about the way you treated me, the way you used me. And I don't know if I can keep being there for you if you're just going to keep taking and never giving anything back." She was silent for a moment, and I could hear her breathing, like she was trying to find the right words. "I get it, Dad. I really do. And I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I don't expect that. But I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. I know it's not going to be easy, but I'm willing to fight for this." I sat down on the edge of the workbench, the weight of her words settling over me. I could feel the tears welling up behind my eyes, but I didn't want to show her weakness. Not now. Not when I was still trying to figure out how I felt. "I'll think about it, Emily," I said, my voice thick. "I don't know where this is going, but I'm not going to shut you out completely. I just need time. We both do." "I understand, Dad," she replied, her voice quieter now, like the fight had left her. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and I love you." "I love you too, Emily," I said, though the words felt bittersweet. I meant them, but the love had been tested, and I wasn't sure how long it would take to heal. I hung up the phone, sitting in the quiet of the shop, letting the silence settle around me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope, though I knew it would take more than just words to fix what had been broken. The road ahead would be long, and I wasn't sure if Emily and I could ever get back to where we once were, but at least now, there was a chance. The following days were quieter, but there was a tension that hung in the air, an unspoken understanding that everything had changed and would never quite be the same again. I spent most of my time at the shop, where I could focus on something tangible, something I could fix with my own hands. There, things were predictable. Engines could be rebuilt, cars could be restored, and in the end, you could look at the finished product and know it was all worth it. But at home, everything was up in the air. Emily's words, her apology, still echoed in my mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't as simple as just forgiveness. Every now and then my phone would buzz with a message from her, but I couldn't bring myself to reply right away. It wasn't that I didn't want to. It was just that I didn't know what to say. I couldn't erase the years of frustration, the times she had disappointed me, the moments when I had given her everything only for it to be thrown back in my face. The pain of feeling like I wasn't enough for her, like I was just a means to an end, had left a scar that I wasn't sure how to heal. But Emily was trying, I could see that. She wasn't just apologizing with words, she was trying to show me with actions, small gestures that indicated a shift, a willingness to do better. One day, about a week after our last conversation, I was cleaning out the back of the shop when I heard the familiar sound of a car pulling into the gravel driveway. I didn't look up right away. It could have been any one of the regulars needing a repair. But then I heard the sound of footsteps approaching, and when I looked up, I saw Emily standing in the doorway. She was holding something, a small box wrapped in simple brown paper, nothing fancy or extravagant. Her hair was pulled back, and her face was softer than I remembered, as though the last few weeks had taken something out of her. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice hesitant. "I wanted to drop by and see if we could talk for a minute." I set down the rag I was holding and wiped my hands on my jeans, still unsure of what to expect. "Sure," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "Come on in." She stepped inside, looking around at the familiar shop, the same place I'd spent so many hours of my life. She looked different here, less like the person who had taken from me without thinking, and more like the girl I remembered from years ago, the one who used to bring me lemonade during the long summer days spent working on old cars. But I couldn't ignore the reality of what had happened. I couldn't forget how she had used me, how she had hurt me. I know I've messed up, and I know it's not going to be easy to fix everything, Emily began, taking a deep breath as she sat down on the stool across from me. She handed me the small box, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But I wanted to give you something. It's not much, but I thought maybe it could be a step in the right direction. I took the box from her, not sure what to expect. It felt light in my hands, nothing extravagant, just something simple. I unwrapped it slowly, feeling a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Inside I found an old picture frame, one that I hadn't seen in years. It was a picture of me and Emily from when she was little, maybe 5 or 6. She was sitting on my lap, her face lit up with a smile, and I was holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The photo was slightly faded, but the memories it brought back were sharp and clear. "I found this the other day," Emily said softly, her voice breaking the silence. "I was going through some old boxes, and I remembered how happy we used to be. I remember how you used to look at me like I was everything. And I wanted to remind you that I still see you that way, even though I haven't shown it. I haven't been fair to you, Dad, and I'm sorry." I sat there, holding the frame in my hands, feeling the weight of the moment. It wasn't about the picture. It wasn't about the frame. It was about the fact that Emily had chosen this memory, this moment, to remind me of the bond we once had. She had chosen to show me that, despite everything that had happened, she still saw me as her father, the one who had always been there for her. "I don't know if I can go back to the way things were," I said, my voice low. "Too much has happened, Emily. Too much has been broken between us. I don't know if I can ever forget how you treated me." "I know," she said quietly, her eyes downcast, "and I'm not asking you to forget. I just want you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to do better, and I'll keep trying, even if it takes a long time." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the person I had hoped she would become. I saw someone who wasn't perfect, who had made mistakes, but who was willing to own up to them, who was willing to work through the mess she had made. It wasn't a magic fix, and I wasn't naive enough to think everything would suddenly be okay. But it was a start, and that's what mattered. "I'm not saying things will go back to the way they were," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I'm willing to try too. We both have a lot of work to do, but if you're willing to put in the effort, maybe we can start rebuilding. It's going to take time, but I'm here." Emily's face softened, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a glimmer of the daughter I had raised, the one who used to sit on my lap with a smile on her face, the one who had looked up to me with love and trust. She stood up slowly, walking over to me and giving me a tentative hug. It was awkward at first, but then it felt like the weight I had been carrying for so long was starting to lift, just a little. "I'll do whatever it takes, Dad," she whispered. I held her for a moment longer, feeling the years of pain and disappointment still lingering in the air between us, but also feeling something else, something that felt like the first step toward healing. As I let go of her, I looked down at the picture frame once more, the image of us together frozen in time. Maybe this wasn't the end of our story. Maybe it was the beginning of something new, something that would take time, patience, and a lot of work, but something worth fighting for. "I'm not going to make any promises, Emily," I said finally, "but I'll try too. I can't promise it'll be easy, but I'm willing to start somewhere." She smiled, a real smile this time, not the forced one from before. "That's all I'm asking for, Dad, a chance." And maybe that was all I needed too, a chance. To rebuild, to heal, to remember that despite everything, she was still my daughter, and I was still her father. The days after Emily's visit passed slowly, but there was a shift in the air. It wasn't that everything was magically better, but it was different, lighter, in a way. The weight that had been hanging over me, the bitterness and the resentment, started to lift, even if just a little. I found myself thinking less about the past and more about what could come next. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a chance to rebuild both my relationship with Emily and my own sense of peace. The shop kept me busy, as always. I was working on a 1972 Chevelle, an old car that had seen better days but still had a lot of potential. Every time I turned a wrench or polished a fender, I felt a little more grounded, a little more in control of my life. I had spent so many years fixating on things I couldn't change, Emily's mistakes, her disrespect, her decisions, and now I was starting to realize that I didn't have to carry that burden anymore. I couldn't change her, but I could change how I responded. I could choose peace. Emily reached out to me a few days after our last conversation. She sent a simple text asking if I wanted to meet for coffee. I wasn't sure if I was ready to see her again, but the truth was I didn't want to shut her out. I didn't want to close the door on the possibility of rebuilding what had been broken. So I agreed, though I had no idea what to expect. When I walked into the coffee shop, I saw her sitting at a table near the window. She looked different somehow, calmer, more grounded. There was a softness in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. I could tell she had been thinking about everything too. As I walked over to her, she looked up and smiled, but it wasn't the smile of someone trying to win me over. It was just a genuine smile, one that spoke of sincerity and understanding. "Hey, Dad," she said, standing up to hug me. I hesitated for a moment, but then I hugged her back. It was awkward at first, but there was something comforting about it. It felt like we were both trying to figure out where we stood, but also realizing that we still had something worth holding on to. "Hi, Emily," I said as we sat down. "How have you been?" "I've been good," she replied, her voice quieter than usual. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I know I messed up. I can't keep making excuses for what I did. I just want you to know that I'm sorry for everything. The lies, the stealing, the way I treated you. You didn't deserve that, and I want to change. I want to be better." I could see the sincerity in her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I believed her. Maybe it wasn't the whole story, maybe there was still a lot of healing to do, but it felt like she was finally owning up to her mistakes. She wasn't trying to justify her actions anymore. She wasn't trying to play the victim. She was just taking responsibility, and that made all the difference. "I know you're sorry, Emily," I said, my voice low, "and I appreciate that. But it's not just about saying sorry, it's about showing me you mean it, about proving that you can change. You've hurt me, Emily, more than you know, but I'm not going to hold that against you forever. I just need to see that you're really trying." "I get it, Dad," she said, her voice steady. "I know I've got a lot to prove, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust again. I can't change the past, but I can work toward the future. I want to be someone you can be proud of, someone who respects you and everything you've done for me." Her words struck me harder than I expected. I didn't want to be cynical, but part of me had spent so long preparing myself for disappointment that I wasn't sure if I could believe it. I didn't want to open myself up to more hurt, but at the same time, I didn't want to close the door on the possibility of healing. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure of whether or not to take that first step. "Emily," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "I've spent so many years trying to make you happy, trying to give you everything you wanted. But in the process, I forgot something important. I have to take care of myself too. I can't keep giving and giving without getting anything in return. I've learned that the hard way." She nodded, her eyes softening. "I know, Dad. And I'm not asking for everything to be perfect right away. I know it's going to take time, but I want to start over. I want to rebuild this, if you'll let me." I took a deep breath, looking at my daughter for the first time in a long time, and seeing her not as the person who had hurt me, but as the person she was trying to become. And maybe, just maybe, there was still room for us to find a way back to each other. "I'm not sure where this is going, Emily," I said, "but I'm willing to give it a shot. We both need to put in the work. I'm not promising that it's going to be easy, but I'm willing to try." She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something resembling hope. Maybe things wouldn't ever be the same, but they didn't have to be. Sometimes starting over meant accepting the past for what it was, and then choosing to move forward, step by step. "I'll take that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I'll work every day to prove that I can be the daughter you deserve." We sat there for a while, talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't an instant fix, and there were still many conversations to be had, many walls to be rebuilt. But for the first time, I felt like we were finally on the same page, like we were both willing to try, even if it took time. And that was enough for now. The weeks after our conversation at the coffee shop passed in a blur of small, significant moments. Emily and I began to rebuild, but it wasn't a smooth or easy journey. There were still days when I questioned whether it was worth it, when I doubted her commitment to change. But there were also moments, fleeting as they were, when I saw glimpses of the daughter I had once known. It wasn't perfect, and I knew it wouldn't be for a long time. But the effort was there, and maybe that was the most I could ask for at this point. One of those small moments came when Emily showed up at the shop one Saturday afternoon, right in the middle of a busy stretch. She was holding a coffee cup in her hand, a simple gesture that struck me as unexpected. She had always been the one to take, to demand, to act as if everything revolved around her needs. But here she was, offering me something as simple as a cup of coffee, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was her way of showing me she understood the importance of small gestures, that it wasn't just about grand apologies or extravagant gifts, but about the little things, the things that really mattered. "Thought you might need a break," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "I brought you some coffee, your favorite." I didn't know how to respond. It wasn't the coffee that mattered, not really. It was the thought behind it. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was the one doing all the giving, all the sacrificing. It was a shift, a change in the way we were relating to each other, and I couldn't ignore it. "Thanks, Emily," I said, taking the coffee and offering a small smile. "I appreciate it." She lingered by the workbench, watching me for a moment before sitting down on the stool across from me. "How's the Chevelle coming along?" she asked, trying to make conversation. "Almost done," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "Just a few more things to finish up, but it's getting there." We talked about the car for a little while, the simple mechanics of it all, grounding us both. It felt easy, like we had found a way back to the kind of relationship we had when she was younger, before all the pain and disappointment set in. It was a tentative peace, but it was peace nonetheless. Later that day, as I was finishing up some work, Emily slipped out of the shop quietly, as if she didn't want to disturb me. But just before she left, she paused at the door and looked back at me. "Dad," she said, her voice uncertain, "I know I've got a long way to go to make things right. I'm not expecting things to be perfect, but I want you to know that I'm trying, and I hope that one day you can look at me and see someone who's worth your trust again." I watched her leave, the words lingering in the air. There was no magic moment where everything was suddenly fixed, no grand gesture that made all the hurt go away. But there was something in her tone, in the way she said it, that told me she was truly trying. And that was something I hadn't felt from her in a long time. Sincerity. The next few weeks were more of the same. Emily continued to reach out, sending small messages, showing up with coffee or just to talk. I didn't let myself get too comfortable, not yet. I kept reminding myself that trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But something in the air had shifted, and I couldn't deny that I was starting to see a different side of Emily. The walls between us were slowly coming down, not because either of us had all the answers, but because we were both willing to work for it. One evening after work, I was sitting at the kitchen table when I saw a message from Emily pop up on my phone. It was just a simple text, but it struck me differently than the others had. "Hey, Dad. I've been thinking about things a lot lately, and I wanted to ask if you'd come to my place for dinner sometime. Just you and me. No rush, no pressure. I just want to spend time with you. I want to show you that I'm serious about this." I stared at the screen for a long time, the weight of the words sinking in. She wasn't just offering an apology or a token gesture. She was asking for something real, an opportunity to show me that she was willing to put in the effort, that she was willing to rebuild, not just with words, but with actions. It was a big ask, and it was one I wasn't sure I was ready for. But the truth was I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that we could find a way back to each other, even if it wasn't easy. So I replied, "I'll come over, just let me know when." The dinner itself wasn't anything extravagant. Emily had cooked a simple meal, spaghetti with meatballs, garlic bread, and a salad. It was nothing fancy, but it felt like a real step forward. We sat at her small kitchen table, the same table she used to sit at when she was a kid, asking me questions about the world and life. The conversation wasn't perfect. There were pauses, moments when the silence felt too heavy, too full of the things we hadn't said over the years. But there was also laughter, and there was a sense of connection that had been absent for so long. As we ate, Emily told me about her life, about the things she had been doing to try and make a change, to be better. She talked about the therapy she had started, about the work she was putting in to understand why she had made the choices she had. It wasn't easy for her to admit, but she was being honest, and that honesty made all the difference. "I don't expect you to forgive me all at once," she said as we finished dinner. "But I hope, over time, you can see that I'm really trying. I'm not asking for everything to be perfect, but I just want a chance to prove that I can be different, that I can be the daughter you raised me to be." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I saw her not as the person who had hurt me, but as the person she was becoming. She wasn't perfect, she had made mistakes, but she was trying, and that was more than I could have hoped for. "I'm not going to promise that everything's going to be fixed overnight," I said, my voice steady, "but I'm willing to give you that chance. We'll take it one step at a time." The relief on her face was immediate, and I could see the weight she had been carrying, the guilt, the shame, start to lift just a little. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was a beginning, and that was enough for now. The days after that dinner with Emily felt different. There was a shift, a subtle change in the air that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't anything dramatic, but there was a sense of calm, a quiet understanding between us that hadn't been there before. I wasn't sure if it was because of the words we had exchanged, or if it was just the weight of time slowly healing the rift between us, but something felt lighter. It was the first time in a long time that I didn't feel like I was constantly on guard, waiting for the next betrayal, the next disappointment. I kept my distance, but not in the way I had before. It wasn't about shutting her out anymore. It was about giving her space to show me who she was becoming. I had to trust that she was genuinely trying to change, but I wasn't going to rush it. Trust was something you earned, not something I could just hand over without any effort on her part. And I was okay with that now. We didn't talk every day, but every time Emily reached out, it felt different. She didn't bombard me with messages or calls, but when she did text or drop by, I saw the sincerity in her actions. She wasn't trying to win me over with grand gestures anymore. It was the small things, the little moments of honesty, the subtle gestures that showed she was putting in the effort. It wasn't just the words, it was how she showed up, how she behaved, how she was holding herself accountable. I didn't expect her to be perfect, but I did expect her to be real. And for the first time in a long time, that's exactly what she was. One Friday afternoon, I found myself sitting in my favorite chair in the shop, taking a break after finishing a particularly tough repair. My mind had been wandering to all the things I had learned over the years, about work, about life, and most importantly, about the kind of man I wanted to be. I had spent so much time focusing on what I could give to others, how I could fix everything around me, that I had forgotten about myself. I had forgotten about my own worth, my own peace, my own happiness. And while I wasn't completely there yet, I was starting to realize that it was okay to focus on myself too. Maybe it wasn't selfishness, it was self-preservation. That's when Emily showed up. She knocked lightly on the door, and when I looked up, there she was, standing in the doorway with a hesitant smile on her face. She didn't speak right away, just stood there for a moment, like she was waiting for some kind of signal from me. I couldn't help but smile back. It wasn't the forced smile of before, the one I put on because I was too afraid to show my emotions. It was a real smile, one that came from a place of understanding. "Hey, Dad," she said softly, stepping inside. "You busy?" I chuckled, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Not too busy, just finishing up some work. What's going on?" She hesitated before speaking again, her eyes flickering to the workbench, the tools, the worn-out chairs. It was clear that she was trying to find the right words, trying to gauge where we stood. "I wanted to bring you something," she said finally, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a small envelope, one that looked like it had been carefully chosen. "It's not much," she added quickly, "just a little something to show you that I'm still trying." I took the envelope from her, feeling the weight of the moment. It wasn't the gift that mattered. It was the gesture. The fact that she was reaching out, that she was still trying to find ways to rebuild. I opened the envelope slowly, my fingers trembling just a little, not out of fear, but out of anticipation. Inside was a simple card, and as I pulled it out, I saw what it said. "For all the sacrifices you've made. For the love you've always given, even when it wasn't easy." I looked up at Emily, who was watching me with uncertainty in her eyes. I could tell she was waiting for my reaction, hoping that I wouldn't brush her off like I had before. I took a deep breath, reading the words again, letting them sink in. It was a simple card, but it held so much more. It was a reminder of what had been lost, but also what could still be found if we both worked for it. "Thank you, Emily," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This means a lot." She smiled, relief flooding her face. "I know it's not a lot. I just wanted to do something that felt right, you know?" "I do," I said, nodding slowly, "and I appreciate it." For a moment, we just stood there, the silence comfortable instead of awkward. It wasn't that we were avoiding the hard conversations, it was just that we didn't need to have them right then. We had already talked, we had already aired our grievances and made our peace. Now it was about moving forward, step by step. "You know," I said after a moment, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking a lot lately about how I've lived my life, about how I've given everything to everyone around me, and in the process I forgot to take care of myself. But that's changing now." Emily nodded, her expression softening. "I get that, Dad. I think I've been guilty of that too, focusing so much on the next thing, the next step, that I forgot to appreciate what I already had, and I'm sorry for that." "I'm sorry too," I said, looking at her with a sincerity I hadn't felt in years. "I know I've made mistakes too. I've been hard on you, and I haven't always been the father I should have been. But I'm learning, Emily. We both are." We stood there for a while, just talking about nothing and everything at the same time. It felt like we were catching up on years of lost moments, filling in the gaps with laughter and conversation. There was no magical fix, no easy solution, but there was something real happening. We were both trying, and that was enough. As Emily left the shop that afternoon, I watched her walk away with a sense of quiet satisfaction. Things weren't perfect, and they might never be. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was hope. Like there was a chance to rebuild what had been broken. And maybe, just maybe, we were both strong enough to make it happen. It wasn't about forgetting the past, it was about learning from it, moving forward, and giving ourselves the space to grow. And that was the kind of peace I had been searching for all along. Life is unpredictable, and the relationships we value the most can sometimes be the ones that hurt us the deepest. But growth comes from acknowledging the pain, understanding where we went wrong, and being willing to do the hard work required to heal. Whether it's with family, friends, or ourselves, honesty and effort are the keys to rebuilding trust. We can't change the past, but we have control over how we respond to it. Don't be afraid to set boundaries, to say enough when you've given too much without receiving respect in return. It's okay to prioritize your own well-being, even if it means taking a step back from those you love. At the same time, don't give up on the possibility of reconciliation. Healing takes time, and people need to show, not just tell, that they're willing to change. And always remember, self-care isn't selfish, it's necessary. Life is a journey, and it's okay to take it one step at a time, knowing that mistakes don't define us. What matters is the effort we put into becoming better versions of ourselves and the courage to rebuild, even when it feels impossible.